There is a kind of awareness that doesn't come from wisdom. It comes from exposure. You can see it in the way some people enter a room already alert, already scanning, already prepared for something to go wrong, even when nothing has happened yet. They don't look afraid. They look composed, too composed. Their reactions are measured. Their emotions arrive late, if at all. And when something unsettling happens, they don't flinch the way others do. They've seen worse. But that isn't the part that feels unsettling. The unsettling part is how familiar this feels to you. Because you've never been reckless with your feelings. You've never trusted easily. You've never assumed safety just because someone smiled. And yet, you can't quite explain why. You don't remember deciding to be this way. You just are. There's a subtle tension that lives in your body even during calm moments. A quiet readiness, not panic, not fear, preparation, as if something inside you learned early that calm can disappear without warning. So you stay ahead of it. You anticipate, you read shifts before they happen, you notice changes in tone others miss, and people call this intuition. But intuition usually feels light. This feels heavier. It feels like carrying a map of emotional terrain you never asked to memorize. There's another strange contradiction. You're deeply attuned to other people's emotions, but strangely distant from your own. You know when someone is upset before they speak. You sense discomfort instantly. You can tell when someone is pretending to be okay. But when someone asks how you are, your mind goes quiet, not because you don't feel anything, because translating what you feel into words feels unsafe somehow. So you default to neutrality. I'm fine, I'm okay, just tired. It's easier that way. There's less risk. You learned, without anyone explaining it to you, that emotions are unpredictable things, that expressing them doesn't always lead to comfort. Sometimes it leads to consequences. So you learn to hold them internally where at least you could monitor them. This makes people misunderstand you. They think you're calm under pressure. They think you're resilient. They think you're emotionally strong. And in a way you are, but not in the way they imagine. Because your strength didn't come from encouragement or support. It came from endurance, from staying present in moments where disappearing would have been easier, from adapting to emotional climates that shifted without warning, from learning how to survive people's moods. And survival leaves marks. One of those marks is hyper-awareness. Another is emotional self-sufficiency. You don't ask for help easily. You don't expect understanding. You rarely assume someone will show up for you in the way you need, not because you're pessimistic, because you're realistic. At least that's how it feels. But there's a cost to this realism. You may have noticed how uncomfortable it feels when someone is genuinely kind to you, not performative kindness, not surface-level politeness, real care. It makes you uneasy, not because you don't want it, because part of you doesn't trust its durability. So you test it without realizing. You pull back, you stay quiet, you watch to see if it remains. And when it fades, as many things do, you tell yourself you were right to stay guarded. There's also the strange guilt you carry. You feel responsible for other people's emotions, even when you logically know you shouldn't. If someone is upset, you wonder what you did. If someone is distant, you assume you caused it. If someone is angry, your body reacts as if danger is present. This isn't empathy in the romantic sense people talk about. This is emotional vigilance. It's being attuned not out of compassion alone, but out of necessity. Because at some point, reading the emotional environment wasn't optional. It was how you stayed safe. And even now, long after those conditions are gone, your system hasn't forgotten. It still reacts as if closeness requires caution. That expressing yourself fully carries risk. That peace can be temporary, which leads to another contradiction. You crave deep connection, but you feel safest at a distance. You want to be understood, yet struggle to let yourself be seen. You feel things intensely, yet appear emotionally contained. This tension shapes your relationships. You may find yourself drawn to people who need support, who are emotionally expressive, who lean on you. That role feels familiar. You know how to be strong for others. But when the focus turns to you, something tightens inside. You don't know how to receive care without scanning. For the moment, it might be withdrawn. So you minimize your needs. You tell yourself you don't need much. You pride yourself on independence. But independence in your case didn't come from confidence. It came from adaptation. There's a subtle grief in this, not dramatic, quiet. It shows up when you realize how much energy it takes to stay emotionally contained, how much effort goes into staying composed, how rare it feels to fully relax in someone else's presence. You may not think of your past often, not consciously, but your body remembers patterns your mind learned to normalize. It remembers unpredictability. It remembers intensity. It remembers learning to read people quickly and accurately because misunderstanding them had consequences. So now, even in safe environments, your system stays alert. This is why rest can feel uncomfortable, why silence sometimes feels heavy, why you feel compelled to stay productive, useful, needed. Stillness gives space for sensations you learn to keep under control. And control became safety. At least that's how it felt. Here's where the discomfort deepens. What if these traits you carry aren't personality quirks? What if they aren't simply being sensitive or being mature? What if they are adaptations formed under pressure? Not weaknesses, not flaws, but strategies. Strategies that helped you endure something that required endurance. If that's true, then the way you relate to emotions, to people, to yourself isn't random. It's patterned. And patterns don't disappear just because circumstances change. They evolve. They hide in plain sight. And they shape who you become. The traits you carry today may not be signs of who you are at your core. They may be signs of what you learned you had to become. But understanding that doesn't happen all at once. It happens when you start noticing how your reactions differ from others. When you realize how much effort goes into staying emotionally regulated. When you recognize that what looks like strength may have been forged under conditions that required it. And that realization is where things begin to shift. Not toward comfort, toward clarity. We'll go there next. Not yet. But that's where this is leading. This is where the meaning sharpens. Not gently, not comfortingly, but clearly. At some point, usually later in life, you begin to notice something that doesn't quite fit the story you've been telling yourself. The traits you were praised for are the same traits that quietly exhaust you. Being calm, being understanding, being emotionally perceptive, being strong. They look admirable from the outside, but internally they feel expensive because maintaining them requires constant internal management. You don't just feel emotions, you monitor them. You don't just connect with people, you assess them. You don't just experience moments, you prepare for how they might turn. And the unsettling realization is this: you are not reacting to the present, you are reacting to the possibility of repetition. Your system learned long ago that emotions don't exist in isolation, they lead to outcomes. So it stays alert, not because danger is present, because danger was once unpredictable. This is the core psychological shift most people never reach. The emotional traits you developed were not responses to isolated moments. They were responses to patterns. Patterns where power was uneven. Patterns where safety was conditional. Patterns where your emotional world had consequences beyond your control. So you adapted. You learned to read before speaking. You learned to soften before expressing. You learned to stay composed even when something inside was screaming. And here's the part that feels uncomfortable to accept. Your emotional traits are not just about empathy, they are about containment. You became skilled at holding intensity without releasing it, at absorbing emotion without expressing it, at understanding others while staying opaque yourself. That's why people feel seen by you, and that's why you often feel unseen, because you learned early that being fully visible was not always safe. So you became perceptive instead of expressive, attuned instead of vulnerable, helpful instead of honest. This doesn't mean you were weak. It means you were strategic in ways no child should have to be. And that strategy followed you into adulthood. It shaped how you love. You may notice that you're drawn to emotionally complex relationships, ones where you're needed, ones where your sensitivity is useful, but you struggle with relationships where emotional safety is stable, predictable, because your system doesn't recognize calm connection as familiar. It recognizes tension, shifts, intensity. So when things are quiet, something in you waits for disruption. You may also notice how difficult it is to receive care without suspicion. When someone is kind, you watch for the cost. When someone offers support, you wonder what it obligates you to. Because earlier in life, care was rarely free. It came with expectations, or volatility, or strings that tightened unexpectedly. So now, even when no strings are present, your system checks for them. This is not distrust. It's memory without images, memory stored in reactions rather than stories. And this is where the most unsettling truth emerges. The emotional traits you developed were never meant to be permanent. They were meant to get you through something. But because they worked, they stayed. They became your identity. You started believing that being hyper-aware is just who you are, that being emotionally self-sufficient is strength, that not needing much from others is maturity. But these beliefs hide a deeper reality. You learn to minimize your needs because expressing them didn't lead to safety. You learn to be emotionally independent because dependence was risky. You learn to stay regulated because emotional expression was punished, ignored, or turned against you. So your system learned to do the work alone. Here's the part most people don't want to hear. Empathy, in your case, was not only compassion. It was survival intelligence. And survival intelligence doesn't turn itself off just because circumstances change. It needs permission that rarely comes from outside. It comes from recognition, from realizing that the traits you rely on were adaptive, not inherent, from understanding that what once kept you safe may now be limiting your ability to feel fully alive. This doesn't mean discarding your sensitivity. It means understanding its origin. Because when you don't, you continue to live as if emotional danger is always one step away. And that creates a life where connection is possible but never complete, where intimacy exists but always with an internal exit plan, where peace feels unfamiliar. This is why rest can feel uncomfortable, why stillness can feel heavy, why joy sometimes triggers guilt or suspicion, because your system learned that good moments are temporary, and it learned that preparation is safer than trust. The psychological truth is this: the traits you developed are not flaws, they are evidence that you learned to survive something that required emotional precision. But survival is not the same as living, and awareness is not the same as safety. At some point, the same intelligence that helped you endure begins to ask a different question. What if the threat is no longer present, but the response remains? What if the strength you're proud of is also the barrier keeping you from deeper connection? That question doesn't come with immediate relief. It comes with discomfort, because it forces you to sit with the possibility that you've been protecting yourself from something that already happened. And that protection, while once necessary, may now be isolating you. The final truth is quiet. You were never broken. You were shaped. And understanding how you were shaped doesn't undo the past, but it does change how you relate to the present. Not by forcing vulnerability, not by pushing connection, but by slowly questioning whether every emotional response still serves you. And that questioning, that's where real transformation begins. Not with comfort, with awareness. And awareness, once it takes hold, doesn't let you go back to who you were before you saw it. It leaves you with a choice to keep surviving or to begin something unfamiliar, something quieter, something more honest. And that choice is not easy because it requires letting go of strategies that once kept you safe and trusting that safety can exist without constant vigilance. Whether you're ready for that or not is something only you can feel. Not decide, feel. And that feeling, that's where everything starts to change.